Hey everybody, it is once again time for a 2021-2022 season preview, and today we're going to be looking at a team that had a phenomenal season last year, and I think really caught a lot of people by surprise with how good they were, and they are certainly going to be looking to build off their success last season into this year, continue that success in the regular season, and hopefully for their sake go on a little bit longer of a playoff run, and that team is the Florida Panthers. Before we get into it, I just ask you please hit that thumbs up and subscribe. It helps the channel so much and is greatly appreciated. But let's get going here. Before we look forward, we have to look back. And it was quite the season for Florida last year. They went 37-14-5, 79 points, and a second-place finish in the Central Division, just 1 point back of the division-winning Carolina Hurricanes. And they were just a couple wins away from winning the President's Trophy. This team scored a ton of goals. And offense has not been an issue for them for the past number of years. They scored 3.36 goals per game, and they've been scoring at a high clip for a few years now. Very, very good offensive team, and that is definitely something that hasn't changed with Florida. One thing that did change last year, however, and I think is the biggest difference between the 2019-20 team that really kind of disappointed, wasn't going to make the playoffs if it wasn't expanded to 24 teams, and also got knocked out in the qualifiers. Their defense. The 2021 team this past year had such a much better year defensively than they did the year before. 2.70 goals against per game. Much, much better number than back in 2020 when they were giving up well over 3 goals per game. And that, to me, was the biggest difference that made Florida so much more successful this past year. Their special teams, very solid all around, 20.5% on the power play and 79.8% on the penalty kill, just a hair below 80% on the PK. Definitely not spectacular top-of-the-league numbers on special teams for Florida, but very solid numbers on special teams for Florida. It's definitely not a game-changing area of the game that is winning them games, but it's also not hurting them in any way either. Just overall, very solid on special teams down there. And all in all, I mean, what a year for them last year, and they're going to be looking to build on that this season and see if they can continue this level of success. In the offseason, they really didn't make a whole lot of moves, and that's to be expected with a team that had as much success last year as the Florida Panthers did. Why change a lot? A lot of their offseason was spent re-signing players, trying to keep the core together, keep the group together. They brought back Forsling on the back end. They brought back Montour on the back end. They brought back, Sam Bennett and Anthony Duclair up front. Like, a lot of their offseason was just re-signing players that they already had. Their one big addition, though, was a big trade with the Buffalo Sabres, bringing in Sam Reinhart from Buffalo. And that is a huge addition. Another top 6 forward for this team. And somebody who's going to add even more offense to an already offensive juggernaut down in Florida. They also added veteran forward Joe Thornton to the roster. And this one was a little bit confusing to me. I understand that they probably want a veteran guy in that locker room, somebody who's been around the league for a long time and, a real leader and a veteran presence. But this team is already so deep up front. I'm not really sure if Joe Thornton fits into their everyday roster. And I'm really interested to see, where he's going to be in the lineup, or if he's even going to be in the lineup on a daily basis, or if he's going to be more of an extra forward with this team. Because when we get to the projected roster, you guys are going to see just how deep they are up front and how many guys are going to be fighting for a limited number of roster spots with the forward group on the NHL roster this year. So I'm not really sure that they needed to sign Joe Thornton, because the last thing that they needed was more forward depth, but they decided to bring him in, and I would imagine it was for a locker room presence and to have a veteran leader added to this group. On the subtraction side of things, their biggest loss was goaltender Chris Driedger, who was taken by Seattle in the expansion draft. He had a phenomenal year for them last year and really was one of the biggest reasons why they were able to be as successful as they were, because once again, Sergey Bobrovsky did not put up impressive numbers, really kind of struggled again this season, and Driedger kind of took the reins as the guy and the starter for this team. So he played a lot of really important games for them last year, played very, very well for them last year, and that is certainly going to be a loss. Puts a lot more pressure now on Spencer Knight to come in and be ready right now as a rookie and play a huge role for this team. They also bought out defenseman Keith Yandle. He's now in Philadelphia, signed there as a free agent, no longer in Florida. And then depth forwards, Alex Wenberg, Nikita Gusev, and Lucas Wallmark all left in free agency and did not return to Florida. So, again, not a lot of changes with this team. I think the big addition, obviously, is Sam Reinhart. The big loss is Chris Driedger. But all in all, a lot of this is going to be a very similar team roster-wise this year than what we had last year. There wasn't a whole lot changing this offseason. Now it is time to get into my projected roster for the Florida Panthers, and there's a lot going on here, and there are going to be a lot of battles in training camp, particularly with the forward group, because there's a lot of players going for a very limited number of roster spots. So, obviously, Alexander Barkov, Jonathan Huberdeau, Sam Reinhart, Sam Bennett, Anthony Duclair, Patrick Hornquist, Carter Verhaeghe. Those are kind of your core forward guys for this team. But then you get into the more depth guys like Noel Acciari, Frank Vetrano, Owen Tippett, Eetu Luostarinen, Joe Thornton, Ryan Lombard, and Mason Marchment. Those are the guys I have making the team to start. But let me tell you, some of those jobs are not safe whatsoever and very much up for grabs in training camp this year. I certainly think that this team is going to carry 14 forwards on their main roster just because of how deep they are at the forward position. But, you look at, guys like Owen Tippett, young player who played a lot last year. Luostarinen, another younger guy. Joe Thornton, again, like I said earlier, I don't really know where Joe Thornton fits into this lineup because they've got so many bodies there already. Ryan Lombard really made a name for himself in the second part of last year and in the playoffs against Tampa Bay on that fourth line with his physicality, his tenacity, his ability to get under the opponent's skin, his toughness. I expect to see Lombard on that fourth line quite a bit this year. I think they need that element in the lineup, and Lombard brings it and really ticks off the opponent and plays physically, finishes every check. They're going to need that. Mason Marchment's another guy that, definitely brings the physical element to the lineup and is going to be looking to be an everyday player for this team. But when we look at the depth side of things, we're going to see that there are a lot of forwards outside of these 14 guys I have making the team that are also going to be trying to take spots from any of those 14 guys because they're going to be looking to be everyday NHL players as well. On the defensive side of things, I think the top six with Florida is pretty well set. Aaron Ekblad, Mackenzie Weegar, Brandon Montour, Gustav Forsling, Marcus Nudevar, and Radko Gudas, I think are pretty much locked in as your top six. I have Noah Juleson as the seventh defenseman right now, but I do think that spot is up for grabs, and I think there's every opportunity for Lucas Carlson to take that seventh D spot. But right now, I have Juleson being the seventh D-man. We'll see what happens in training camp. And obviously, in goal, you've got the rookie, Spencer Knight, who did play at the end of last season, but not enough games for it to count as a year. So he's a rookie this year. And I think he's going to come in and pretty much have to be the guy for them. Maybe not starting every game, but somebody who's going to have to play a huge role for this team and probably be the 1A because Sergey Bobrovsky has really struggled his first 2 years in Florida. The numbers were a little bit better last year than they were in his first season, but they were still not impressive, nowhere near where they need to be for somebody making the amount of money that Bobrovsky is. And After the first 2 seasons of him as in a Panthers uniform, I have no reason to believe that Sergey Bobrovsky is going to get back to being the Vezina-level Bobrovsky that we saw in Columbus. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on Spencer Knight to play right away and play really, really well right away. I think he's going to be the 1A for this team, and Bobrovsky at this point is a $10 million 1B. And I think Knight is going to start more games, and I think Knight is probably going to be the better goaltender this year. I'm a huge Spencer Knight fan. I have a lot of faith in him. I loved watching him in college and what he brought to the table. And I think he's going to end up being the better goaltender for the Florida Panthers this year. Now moving on to the depth category, and there are a ton of guys, particularly forwards, who are going to be trying to take roster spots here. Alexei Heponiemi, he played games last season. He's going to be looking to take a roster spot. Anton Lindell, their draft pick from a couple drafts ago in the first round. I think Lindell's probably still a year away, but he's definitely going to be competing for a job in training camp this year. And if he's able to win it, that would, again, knock one of these other guys down the depth chart. Saren Noel is a guy who's got a couple of AHL seasons under his belt. 21 years old now. He's going to be looking to make that jump into the NHL. Zach Dolphy, they signed, as kind of a veteran depth type guy. He would play on the fourth line if he was playing NHL games. I think he's going to play most of this year in the AHL, but if they run into issues, they need to start calling guys up. They have some injuries. Dolphy will definitely be a guy that could be called up. And Yuho Lamiko is another younger player that is going to be looking to take a full-time NHL roster spot this year. So this is what I mean. I've got them keeping 14 forwards on the roster already. And then there's another 5 here in the depth category that could conceivably make the team and play NHL games this year. So they've got 19 forwards going for 14 spots. And there is going to be a lot of competition in camp this year for who's going to make the roster and who's going to start in the AHL as far as the forwards go. On the back end, again, I think the top 6 is pretty well set, but I think there is going to be a battle between Noah Juulsen and Lucas Carlson for that number 7 defenseman spot, and whoever doesn't get the 7 spot is going to be the first guy in line to get called up if there are ever any injuries and they need a call up as far as the back end goes. And then they have veteran defenseman Kevin Connaughton there as well, who, again, not going to make the team out of camp, going to start in the AHL, but if you need a call-up, he is a guy that would be getting called up at some point if there were injuries on the back end and is available for them. Third goaltender is going to be Sam Montembo. They brought him back this year. Obviously, Spencer Knight and Sergey Bobrovsky are your NHL tandem, but if either of those guys were to get hurt or miss time, Montembo would be the third guy. He would be called up and then take the spot of whoever was out there. So gives you some goaltending depth there. Definitely not an everyday NHL goaltender, but can fill in when needed, and he's shown that in the past. So that is my projected roster for the Florida Panthers this year. And I think there's going to be a lot of battles in camp, especially among the forwards. There's a lot of guys going for a limited number of spots, and we're going to find out who makes it and who doesn't by the time we get into October. So, Florida Panthers, obviously trying to build off a very, very strong season last year, hoping to continue that success in the regular season again this year, and hoping for some more playoff success. Unfortunately, they ran into the eventual Stanley Cup champions in the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round last year. That was definitely a very tough first round matchup for a team as good as the Panthers, and they're definitely going to be looking to go a little deeper in the playoffs this year. But not that many changes in the offseason. Bring back a very similar team And there are definitely some questions I have with this group. There's no doubt about that. I think their defense depth is a little bit of a question because they have Ekblad and Uyghur as their top 2 guys, but then there's a pretty good fall off after that. So overall defensive depth is definitely a question. And goaltending. I mean, if Spencer Knight isn't ready, this team could be in trouble. Because like I said, Bobrovsky hasn't shown any signs of being able to carry this team. So if Spencer Knight isn't ready, that could be an issue for sure. However, I'm a huge Spencer Knight fan. I think he is ready. I think he's going to have a great year this year. He's going to be their best goaltender, I believe. And I think Florida should be a really good team this season, building off what they did last year. So we'll see what happens with the Panthers, but like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, our merch store, memberships, and donation links are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you all soon.